Welcome to this week's episode of the Business of Real Estate podcast with Lynn Hoffman and Eric Johnson. Today it's forms, forms, forms. Yes, the bane of existence of all real estate agents. We are talking about forms. And we are welcoming today one of our fellow managers, Nathan Morissette, who also happens to be the realtor in residence for OREA. Nathan, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
That's
really
good.
Appreciate it.
Because you love forms, don't you?
I love forms. I know it's weird to say, but I actually do like forms. It's the one tool that we use every day in the business, right? So it's pretty exciting to be involved in that aspect of it. But yeah, I do like forms.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing, Lynn. We were talking beforehand, before filming. It's just like, it's the one thing that people will mess up. But it's something they have to do. It's part of every transaction, right?
But there's so many changes all the time, and keeping up with the changes.
Yes.
I did want to ask Nathan a quick question, just an overview. Were you involved in helping write the new forms that came out through TRESA?
Yeah, so
Okay.
I was absolutely not as the role as realtor in residence, but I also volunteer on the standard forms committee for a number of years. So pretty neat. And I'll talk about the process for that just so all the listeners understand what happens. In Ontario, the forms are run by the Ontario Real Estate Association, obviously, and they're for members by members. And they have a forms committee that gets together. Goes through all of the inquiry suggestions for the forms, makes those decisions together, and then they get sent to the board of directors for approval, and then ultimately launched typically every year around December for the following year. But if there's something that was maybe more immediate of need, they will release it mid-year or whenever it's needed. But yeah, it's a pretty interesting process. So I've been involved in that aspect to see the behind the scenes, and it's pretty neat.
When was the last time the forms were changed to the extent that they've been changed over the last 12 months?
I don't know if that's ever happened, to be honest. I've been involved for 6 or 7 years, and when TRESA Phase 2 came in, the reason was the legislation changed so much. And all of the forms had to obviously be adaptive to that so that we could, help our clients, but also comply with the legislation the way they're written. And because of the amount of changes, pretty much every form had to be changed or adjusted in some way, shape, or form. Even, there were thousands of changes, obviously, major ones with new forms, but even little things like changing the word REBA to TRESA, the amount of the times that had to happen across the forms, as you can imagine, and finding those
words,
is a process for sure.
Yeah, that's where you need a really good proofreader to go through all of that.
Absolutely.
You probably need several.
Yeah. I think, one of the key words you used there, you mentioned the word legislative change. And I think that's the big thing that I've seen. And, I'll share that having been married to a lawyer and having worked for a real estate lawyer, that's how I got introduced to the industry, is that it was ingrained in me that this is a legally binding agreement. And I think sometimes agents, they say they know, and I know they know, but they treat it like it's not sometimes, right? When we get, there's certain dates and times. It's irrevocable until this date and time, and somebody waits till after that. People say, well, we can go back, we can, do this, we can still have an agreement, but legally, if somebody was to swoop in, so if I miss my irrevocable date, so let's say you and I are in a deal and we patch it up, we say, we'll do this, let's just move forward. But if another offer came in, it was much sweeter, I can then say, sorry, but we really didn't have a deal, that died, and we have a better one, we're going with this one, right?
Yeah.
And is that something you see a lot as both an agent and a manager?
Yes and no. I wouldn't say it's across the board common for that to happen, but that is an instance that does happen throughout the industry. And, the one thing I like to say, it's never a problem until it's a problem. And, you say that you'll accept it, or, I'm going to go, I'm in the middle of an appointment and we'll get back to you. But, as you said, realtors, they know the contracts, but sometimes it's understanding the why. Why is this written this way? Why is this in here? Or how does that apply directly is maybe sometimes forgotten, right?
Yeah.
We learn, we go through the motions every day, and so then we sometimes forget that. But, that time frame is super important, and we got to remember that we are in a professional business. We have dealing with our clients in a professional capacity, and these are legal documents that we are ultimately helping our clients. Usually, with the largest transaction that they're purchasing, we can't take that lightly, right? So the timelines are absolutely important. That's what they're there for. Right? The timeline is there, especially irrevocable. It's there because that buyer has a time that they need to know if they've actually had the purchase or not.
And my favorite saying is dead is dead.
Absolutely.
I get people asking me, can we amend a dead deal? No.
No.
Dead is dead. Get a whole new one. Or
You can revive it. You can definitely go
offer.
back to the
Yeah.
back to the table with it.
Yeah.
Absolutely, you can.
But you
do
cannot
that.
counter
That's right.
offer on
That's right.
a dead deal.
Correct.
Dead is
Yeah.
dead. So
Yeah.
I think that's something they have to understand. I think the other part of this is it's basically contract law.
Oh, yeah.
That
Yeah.
we're, not basically, it is contract law. It's contract law that they're dealing with, and so these things are very important. Now, back in the day, when things weren't time-stamped the way they are and things like that, you might have got away with a couple of minutes different. Nobody would have picked that up,
Absolutely.
but not now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not now.
Especially, pen and paper.
Yeah.
Fax machines. Fax
Yes.
machines had a timestamp on it, but maybe you didn't necessarily know the initials. And, when questions like that come up, it's always, listen, everything is tracked, right? Down from, we have
Yeah.
digital signature programs, DocuSign, AuthentiSign, et cetera, and they all have these timestamps that you're doing. But not only that, typically, the offers are being sent back and forth via email as well, so there's timestamps on that. So everything is tracked with down to the client's signature, initial, and when you're sending and receiving. So it's a little different in the last 5 to
Oh, yeah.
15 years,
Yeah.
but also a good thing because then it is trackable, right? And you can say this is what's here, and so
Yeah.
big changes there for sure.
There's several things that I run into quite frequently. We were talking about some of them beforehand. So happy to hear what you think is your most frequent question or problem. I've got a couple.
Okay.
I had a person recently that wouldn't sign a mutual lease within the irrevocable, within the proper time.
Right.
She didn't understand that the person had the 10 days for the condition. So she didn't understand it. We had to bring out some heavy guns with the lawyer. We had to get her a lawyer to make sure she understood what she wasn't signing.
Right.
So these things happen, but it's also, I think, for that point, incumbent on the agents to really explain these things to their client. What in their sole and absolute discretion don't you understand? This means this condition is there for this person to make a change in their mind, and if it falls within the right time frame, you must let them out of the contract.
Yeah, and that's important. How those conditions and clauses are written
written.
is pretty important. Going to the OREA side of things, obviously those are pre-print clauses. So, as far as a realtor, that they've been through a process to get that wording the way it is, and sometimes there are a reason for it. Sometimes people like to create their own. I've seen some pretty wild ones as well, but there's due diligence involved in that too. When there's discrepancies there, it generally goes obviously to a court or
to
something
go to-
like that. But the mutual release signature and abiding by those timelines is something that just is it's part of the process. But
Yeah.
most of the time, like you said, Lynn, it's the issues tend to arise. I'm not saying all of them, but most of them tend to arise when there's lack of explanation and communication. If you're taking the time to explain to them what it is that they're signing, what is the process, generally those issues down the road aren't happening.
Right.
Because they're fully informed and aware
Right.
of what the process is.
And that is my point with this, that it's critical that agents understand it themselves first, and then can articulate that properly to the client.
Yeah.
To avoid these problems.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's, one thing, because having recently gone through the process of getting my license and.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Having gone through the class, that was the one thing they stressed was us having to explain clauses. And, it's as you go through some of those clauses, it's like, wow, there is quite a bit here, and making sure they completely understand. And that was the one thing that was stressed to me from my instructors was that it's one thing to say, explain it, but do they understand it?
Right.
And it's incumbent upon us as an agent to say, to ensure that they do understand what is being said in there.
Yeah.
And it's also, I think, incumbent upon the agent to understand, because, we were talking about it is, and I've heard so many stories where people misuse waivers and fulfillment of conditions, right?
Yeah.
And because they mean two different things, as my instructor said, if I have to show that we fulfilled this condition, and let's say it's on financing,
Yeah.
and I say, everybody here around my area uses a waiver, I'll just send a waiver. She said, that should trigger in your head. You should be asking some questions. What do you mean you're waiving? Like,
Yeah.
do you have the financing? What's going on? Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
I mean, again, that's like part of that professionalism aspect of, using the right form for the right purpose. The way most of the clauses, obviously you can't speak to every single one, most of the clauses are written where it can be notice of fulfillment or waived at their sole and absolute discretion. And so it can be waived, right? It can be waived, but when it's waived, you, again, need to question, did they fulfill it, right? Now, they're waiving it, so they're still bound to those conditions. That condition is now gone, right? But again, you want to maybe ask those questions. Was that actually fulfilled? You shouldn't have to do that though, right? If they're waiving it, generally what we see, they waive a home inspection because they actually didn't do the inspection clause, right? That's kind of the most typical one, because as the listing agent, if they did a home inspection or not, right? Where the financing condition, it might not be, you might not know if they have actually fulfilled it. They might not need to fulfill it because for whatever reason they had it in there or whatnot. But if they're fulfilling it, they should be using that notice of fulfillment, right? And as professionals, we need to make sure we're using the right documentation. Sometimes it comes down to I don't want to say laziness, but maybe convenience.
Laziness.
Or lazy. Okay, all right. You went there. That's fine.
We'll
That's
pull
fine.
punches here.
Where maybe you don't do the home. Maybe you have a let's financing and home inspection clause, right?
Yeah.
You have a client. They get approval for their financing through their mortgage professional, but then they decide they actually don't want to go ahead with the home inspection. Then they don't want to do it. So sometimes agents will just do a waiver for both. Right? Because it's a little easier instead of doing one notice of fulfillment and one waiver. But the proper way, let them know that you fulfilled it. Let them know if you're waiving. That's the proper way to do it for sure.
That's the other thing.
That's why there's two forms.
That's the other thing I see all the time. People just throwing everything on the one waiver or notice of fulfillment, whichever one they do. And I don't like that. I'd like them to have one separately for each one. You can.
Yeah.
Sometimes when they do that, they've forgotten the dates or the irrevocable times, and they may miss one by doing that. I think it's problematic. The other issue is if they waive the home inspection and they get in there in the home, the buyer gets in the home, and a month later they find something wrong, they got no leg to stand on because they waived it.
Yeah.
They said, I'm good, I'm going to go ahead with this.
That's right.
You're out of luck. And that is where I believe the buyer's agent needs to inform them what the difference is.
And I'll let me just add this. I think because I like looking at the psychology of things, is that there's almost the mindset of I want to get this deal done rather than looking after the best interests of my client. And so I think there are agents that will sometimes get in that position where I need some deals, I need to make some money, let's just get this deal done, versus I really need to make sure I'm looking after my client's best interest, which is why you should be asking questions when they waive things to make sure that, hey, is this going to pose a problem near the end, near the close? Because maybe we take another deal where I have more certainty. Right? I know, that's just my thought, is that's why they would do that, is I just need to get this deal done rather than looking after the best interests of my client.
Yeah, and those duties and obligations to our client, they don't ever go away. So that's always got to be the forefront of it too.
Tragedy of all that is that they may think they're expediting things, but a few months later that could back to bite them, and they run the risk of being suspended, having to go back on their courses. You could probably speak to more of the problems, but they get everything from a hand slap and a warning to you're going back to school or you can't trade for a while. And I suppose as it gets more egregious now, there are stronger penalties and stronger things. So taking a shortcut is not necessarily a shortcut. They may run into problems down the road.
Temporary shortcut, maybe.
Temporary
and
shortcut.
Maybe long-term not. And
Yeah,
I think,
yeah.
you know, the last year and a half ago when TRESA Phase 2
Yeah.
came out, they increased the
Yes,
amount
they did.
that fines could be imposed on
Yeah.
both agents and brokerages.
Yeah.
And I think in light of recent events and certain reports that have come out with the regulator, that might be increasing, maybe not the limits, but the amount that agents are going to be penalized for things. Because, you know, when you're doing something that's inappropriate or against the rules and you're getting fined half the amount of what the commission is, you know, are you learning your lesson, and those types of things come into question. So, you know, it's important. Yeah, you are under a microscope in this business. There's no question about it, but as you should be. Right, we're
And
dealing with
making
our
sure
clients for that.
making sure you've disclosed everything. There's some new forms for disclosure now.
Absolutely.
And those are very interesting as well. So we've got latent defects, we've got,
Yeah.
I like them to fill out, for example, if, and I'll probably get the form wrong, but the 127 form for the disclosure of different things that.
Oh, if they're not putting in an
Yeah,
offer, buyer
if we're
acknowledgement.
not
yeah,
doing this, we're
yeah,
not doing this,
yeah.
or I understand, agree and accept that this is a historical property, or that there may have been a death or a suicide in the home.
Yeah.
I mean, I tell my agents to put everything on there so they could at least say later that, yes, you were notified of these things, and we went ahead, and we didn't put anything in there, so they've
Yeah.
covered themselves on that. I'm all about them making sure they've disclosed fully to the client.
Yeah, I've never heard of an issue where someone's had a problem oversharing information.
No.
Or been penalized for doing so.
Yeah.
And so, you know, in those regards, it's
Yeah.
usually best to do that. 127, you know, acknowledgement of conditions in an offer,
Yes.
that's a great form because,
Yeah.
especially the home inspection one, right?
Yeah.
If they don't want to include a home inspection, there is a preprint clause in the APS that's bold that says, you know, they've had the right to a home inspection.
Yeah.
We like to go over that with
Yeah.
the clients as well. But having that extra form saying these are the conditions that we're not putting in, or maybe someone doesn't want to put a sale of property condition in.
Yeah.
They might be financially okay to do so,
Yeah.
but that form, what it does is it first brings to their attention that
Yeah.
this is what they're doing.
Yeah.
But second, it documents the fact that you've had the conversation.
Yes.
Right, which is important. And if they decide, listen, that's their
fine.
choice. It's like when you show someone a house.
Yeah.
And it might not be your favorite house, or you don't think it's for them,
Mm-hmm.
but they still want to go ahead and purchase it. You give them the information. They're the ones buying and
They make the
selling.
decision.
Right, and they
As
have to
the-
make that decision. So those forms like that. The disclosure ones, though, Lynn, are very interesting because, you know, the latent defect form is $2.99 latent defect.
Yeah.
So that's specific for latent defects.
Yeah.
But 602 disclosure form
Yeah.
is a great one because it has four or five different things that you can use as a disclosure, plus another section to actually make the disclosure. But the reason why those are important now is because the legislation changed where they actually spelled out what you have to do with the disclosure.
Right.
Right? So there are certain things in TRESA that say communicate. So when TRESA talks about number of competing offers,
Right.
there's, you know, you have to communicate the number of competing offers to everyone who's making one of the offers. It says the word communicate, it doesn't say disclose. So communicate means that most of us are doing that through a showing system,
Yeah.
or text message or phone call or
Yeah.
email to them to notify them, and that's fine. But when it says the word disclosure, it actually talks about what you have to do when you have to disclose something. And it says it has to have the prominent placement of the word disclosure. It has to bring to the recipient's attention that is in fact a disclosure. It has to be in plain language. And make best efforts to obtain acknowledgement on all that good stuff too. So communicate versus disclosure form, that brings you with compliance because it has the word disclosure on the top.
Right.
It's very clear that it's a disclosure, right? It's not buried in an APS and 8 pages of documents, 6 or 7 pages with all these clauses. It's very clear that it's a disclosure. So certain things, when they say disclose, you have to follow those steps for a reason. And yeah, pretty interesting.
And my advice is always, if in doubt, disclose.
Absolutely.
If in doubt, disclose.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of times they'll say to me, well, it's all been remediated. It happened 5 years ago.
Yeah.
It's fully remediated. So my question is, well, do they have a proof of the invoice? Do they have proof of the work? Do they have any certification or warranties on the work? I said, you don't have to tell them if it's been all remediated. However, I like to say if you're going to get an offer, then you could present the other party with these warranties and this work that has been done.
Yeah.
It's a step beyond. I don't really believe they have to do that.
Yeah, it's best practice
But
for
it's-
sure.
yeah.
You know, especially with latent defect, like
Yeah.
leaky basement's the easy one, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of the most common. There's a latent defect if you have a leaky basement. You know, in TRESA, if you have it fixed, it's not considered a latent defect, and you wouldn't actually have to disclose
Nope.
it. However, would it be best practice to disclose? Absolutely. Usually, there's warranties that are
That's right.
involved.
That's what I'm saying,
You
yeah.
got the warrant, the paperwork to say,
Yeah.
hey, this is what it
This
is, we did
basement
it.
company did
Also,
this, blah, blah, blah.
sometimes you fix it, maybe a month before you sell or before you close, and the work hasn't really been tested to see if it's actually fixed the problem completely, right? And so by making that information available to them, you can do that, say, here it is, and then they are making that decision being informed. Because I always like to say, nothing stops someone from suing you.
Yeah.
Yep.
They may not win, and you may be okay to do it, but what's gonna happen is when they move into the home, you know the neighbors are gonna tell them what happened within
First
a
thing
week,
they do.
right? And so that's gonna start a problem. So if they're gonna find out from the neighbors, you might as well tell them up front and let them know what the work is.
So
And-
true,
and
so
that-
true.
Yeah.
That's the thing that I'll say is, look, you might as well let them know now.
Yeah.
Because the neighbors are gonna come over and say, oh, the rotor-rooter guy or this guy or that guy was there, there must have been a problem.
Every week or every time it rains.
Yeah, every time it
Yeah.
rained. So best to tell them. I think the agents are sometimes just afraid that the deal will fall apart.
Absolutely.
And that's the crux of their problem. But if it's gonna fall apart, it's gonna fall apart, so you might as well be upfront with it and do best practices.
Oh, yeah,
100%.
my favorite story is working for the lawyer. I'd set up seminars for him, and he was talking about these type of things, and he said there was the one client who moved in, and the neighbor came over and said, "Oh my God, can you believe Fred hung himself in the garage
Yeah.
there?"
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
It was like first time the homeowner hears that,
heard.
they will come and share those
Oh,
things.
yeah,
But
100%.
that happened, and it was just like, my God, that is just a disaster.
Yeah.
Right. So yes, definitely disclose those things.
Yeah.
I want to just take a step back for a moment because we keep talking about TRESA and how TRESA came in. And yes, there were a number of changes. One of the things being that we have these self-represented parties, but also designated rep, which changed all about multiple representation.
Yeah.
And so we do have brokerages that have said we talked about this. They make a decision that we're
Yeah.
going to be designated
Yep.
rep or we're going to be multiple rep moving forward. Typically, that's going to be a small, probably a sub brokerage decides to go multi-rep because they're really just a team. What have you seen any issues or confusion among realtors? Because I think you had
Oh, I have. Had one the other
you
day.
brought that up
I had to-
beforehand.
I had to
That's why I want to
argue.
come back to
Yeah.
I had to argue with a young lady.
Yeah.
And she wasn't listening to her own administrator on her team. She wasn't listening to my front desk. And then she called me and I said, no, you're wrong. Go
Yeah.
check it out. And she said, oh, okay. She said, but I've done this before and nothing's happened. I said, well, you're lucky. But I said, maybe when this hits the lawyer's office or later down the road in our deals department, you might be asked
Yeah.
to change the form.
So she used brokerage
she used the
representation
210.
form
Yeah.
and didn't
Yeah.
use the designated rep form, yeah. And so,
And was too lazy to want to change it.
your words, not mine.
There's a common theme here with you, Lynn. The word lazy pops up every once in a while.
So I will
But
say,
it's not, it's a problem because
Yeah.
in that moment of that shortcut, they open themselves up to all these other problems.
well, there's a lot of risk with that specific example.
Yes.
So, a year and a half ago when Tress was here, the funny thing is it's been a year and a half and
Yeah.
I still get asked this question quite often. With designated rep and brokerage representation, it's I don't want to say similar or simple, but before TRESA, everyone had brokerage representation, and that's where the brokerage represented every single client.
Yeah.
And it was very confusing to the client because you would say, okay, I'm your agent, I list your house, and then when Lynn, who works at our office, if she brought a buyer, it was multiple rep. The client didn't understand that because they knew that they didn't know Lynn.
Yeah.
How could she represent them? It made no sense.
Right.
So designated representation came in and that alleviated that. It said, okay, you know what? Your brokerage is gonna provide services to the client, but you are gonna provide services and representation
Right.
as the designated rep.
Right.
What that allows is it minimizes the amount of times you'd be in multiple rep scenario.
Right.
Right? It's only multiple rep. If I have the listing and I'm the designated rep for the listing, I also represent the buyer. It's
Buyer.
there.
Yeah.
Where the big risk comes, and most brokerages have opted in to go designated and, or one or the other, sometimes it's a sub brokerage, or, you know, a little small boutique independent brokerage of, you know, 2 or 3 people, family, maybe they go brokerage because then they can just freely share all
Share
the
information.
information between each other, right? They're all
Yeah.
representing the client.
Yeah.
Where it gets interesting is if a brokerage like that, let's use a husband and wife, maybe they have their own brokerage, they just decide to do brokerage representation. Well, if they have a listing and a potential buyer comes along and they want to purchase that listing, if they say, you know what, I want to buy this house, but I don't want to be in multiple rep, well, that brokerage, because it's 2 people, have an issue because now they can't represent that buyer because that buyer doesn't want to be in multiple rep and everyone at that brokerage is now going to be representing that client.
Yeah.
And so they would actually have to refer them to another brokerage to
Yeah.
be represented in that case.
Yep.
And so that's why most of the time the brokerages opt designated because it keeps it simple.
Yeah.
And the scenario that you gave, Lynn, is one that happens all too often.
Yeah.
Is that it's a very simple mistake. You use the wrong paperwork, you forget. It's the one you've been using for years. And I
That's the
get
problem.
that.
I get that
right?
too.
And it's the one you've always used and you go to use it. But what it does is it puts everyone at risk. So let's say Eric, newly licensed realtor here, had the training, so he should know, but let's say he does a listing with brokerage representation, right? He puts the listing and we all work at the brokerage. Well, if my brokerage has a policy that says everyone has to be designated, right? I don't know that it's brokerage representation with his client.
Right.
And so I go and show the house, and now I want to submit an offer.
Yeah.
And guess what? It's multiple rep.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that, and I didn't disclose to my client that it was multiple rep.
Right.
Because the way that TRESA is written is, as soon as
As
you
you know.
enter into multiple rep, you need to make that disclosure.
Yeah.
And, you know, our take on it is, you know, showing the house, gray area, but if they show an interest in that house.
Or they say, I'm gonna make an offer.
I would like to make an offer, or what would you
325 and
consider?
326.
325 and 326 needs to be done,
Yeah.
right? And you need that multiple rep
Right.
disclosure. And so, but if it's brokerage representation and I'm thinking it's designated, I don't know, and I don't get that disclosure.
Right.
So now they put the entire brokerage at risk of entering into multiple rep without ever knowing. Sign that client, and now that the entire brokerage is representing that client. And that's the big mistake here is,
Yeah.
you know, you can very easily cross over there, and that's why paperwork is checked. But, you know, we can, our brokerage has policies and we can work on them to help them with that. But
Yeah.
it's one of the common things. And what's even, I don't want to say more common, I can't believe I'm saying more common, but the fact that there's still people that don't understand the difference between the two. And that to me is a big issue across the province, is that there's a lot of registrants out there that still do not understand brokerage representation and designated.
And where that comes about, I think the most, is for agents that don't transact in real estate frequently. So let's say these rules came in, I forget it was October, November, and then they were supposed to go in force for December, January.
Right.
Then we had a grace period till March or something. Let's say they hadn't traded at all during that time, and they hadn't taken advantage of watching all the videos and all the training and all the stuff we've done, never mind what RICO and everybody else did. They didn't know.
Yeah.
And so it seems like 9-10 months later, they're waking up and asking this question
Yeah.
because they're not busy in the business of real estate.
Yeah.
And that's a problem.
The part-timers, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that's true
Well,
too.
those-
That's true. That's a big one. But we do have some agents that may do 3 to 4 transactions a year with close friends. And so
And
they're
some of
delayed.
them, that's all they want. And
That's
they're
all they want,
comfortable
and
with
that's
that.
fine.
Yep.
But they're delayed
They're not up
in
to
this
date,
learning process. So I look at them and go, how the heck can you not know this? It's been going on since then. But that's the reason, because they haven't been doing anything
And
for a
I
while.
think there's also the category of the disengaged as well.
Yes.
So, the ones that don't attend office meetings or brokerage events or brokerage training
Yeah.
or, association,
training.
provincial training, any training, right? Because they know, and understandably, right? We're in an industry where we are independent contractors. We're doing a lot of this stuff on our own, but there's a reason why there are levels to this, and there are reasons why associations and brokerages might email or contact you with information, because some of it is important.
It's actually important,
right? And
yeah.
so the disengaged also have there where they're
Yeah.
doing deals, but maybe not up to date on things. And right or wrong, we have a responsibility to be up to date on all
Well,
that. right?
that's our role, is we have to show RICO that we have given these courses, that we've done this stuff, that we've given them all the tools. They haven't used it, so we have to make sure we've covered ourselves as well, make sure we've done everything we can possibly
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
But the old term, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And
and
that's a tough one.
and even though they still have to do the educational courses
Yeah.
every 2 years, how many times do you hear somebody just they're doing something
Oh,
else
they're
while they're
educational
watching-
courses.
Yes.
Right, yeah.
Right. And I would say, look, if you're a brokerage out there, one thing I think that we've done very well as a brokerage is put together these templates and these
yeah,
these
they're
packages with here's all the potential forms you would need for this type of transaction. We've laid out. We have another manager, Elizabeth Peters, much like you, does a lot of work with forms and documents, and she'd put in a lot of effort putting together all these packages, specifying this, and we put in codes, like
Yeah.
100, 200, like all these things, and this is designated rep for
possible,
condo, here's all the potential documents,
Yeah.
here's residential, commercial.
Yeah.
Here's
Or
all the
multiple
potential-
rep or designated rep on this side, yeah.
So-
I've
so
never
we-
seen templates or transaction kits gathered together in that capacity.
No.
It's a pretty easy process when you have it laid out like
Call
that,
them
right?
the blue stick men. The
Yeah.
IKEA blue stick men that walk you through it. If you take the time to go in there and look at them and become familiar with them,
Yeah.
it's pretty straightforward, and
Yeah.
everything is in those forms and ticked off in the appropriate
And-
places.
yeah,
for
and that's
that-
the thing.
For that specific
Scenario. Yeah.
scenario.
And we have the
Yeah.
check marks in there, and we have the proper forms, because there was just recently we had FinTrack had talked about some changes, and there was this one class, and someone was saying, well, I'm using this form. And
No.
they're like, what? This, it was a 6 something, and they're like,
Yeah.
no, this is the form you should be using. It's still a valid form.
Right.
just
But
not
the
up to date.
brokerage would prefer, here's what we suggest you use.
Correct.
That's why we have the templates.
Yep.
That's why if you are a brokerage owner, putting together these type of templates do mitigate a lot of issues.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah,
It just
Provided
makes it
the
easier for an
answers are-
agent to follow through and go, these are all the potential ones I would need.
that's right.
It's all education. But you said something, I was talking about it before we came on, you said something a few months ago when you did your fun with forms, that was very interesting. If you start using the wrong forms enough times, or let's say you have a RICO complaint about something and you send all your documentation. If some of those documents are the incorrect form or incorrectly filled out, that spells to incompetence. RICO
Yeah.
look at that and say, okay, well, maybe what they did wasn't so bad, but look at the forms they're sending in, look at the paperwork that went with this. There's a level of not understanding what they're doing, so incompetence. And that really struck me, especially with the cooperating brokerage part,
Yeah.
when we
Yeah.
are on the listing side.
Oh, man.
It's hard.
I'm on a mission to help the province with that
Well,
one.
I am too, but you get a DocuSign at
Yeah.
11 o'clock at night, and they've filled in both listing side and cooperating side, and they want my signature on both, and I can't get rid of that until I sign both,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I have been guilty in the past of just signing both of them, going, what the hell, it's better two signatures than one, but it isn't.
Yeah,
It isn't. It's better to send it back to them and say, please remove me from here.
Yeah.
There is no cooperating brokerage.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't like
You're
to
on a
harp
mission.
too much on that, too much, because I think the intention of everyone is to do the right thing.
I know.
And specifically to the co-op one, we're talking about when the the confirmation of cooperation and representation is filled out, and it's within the brokerage, right? Listing is with the brokerage, and the other agent is with the brokerage. There is no cooperating brokerage. But what happens is the buyer side submits the offer, typically, and when that happens, they want to fill out the co-op side. Mostly because they want to fill out the part that they want to get paid, right? Understandably, because they want to confirm the amount that they're getting.
Yep.
Because there is no cooperating brokerage
Yeah.
in that side. Sometimes it's because they don't realize that there is no cooperating brokerage. They don't understand the process, but there is no cooperating brokerage there.
Right.
And that's why all the paperwork, listing agreement is labeled total commission, if there is a cooperating brokerage,
Right.
et cetera. But you want to fill that out.
Yeah.
And if you're filling out the paperwork, you don't need to put the cooperating brokerage in there. You can just put it in as listing brokerage, designate a rep for the buyer and the seller, are each represented with somebody different, and there's no multiple rep. There's a box for that. I believe it's 1A3, but it's the last one there. And you can put in the additional comments. Designated rep for the buyer will be paid the proportionate commission of the cooperating brokerage commission, if you want to confirm it that way, right? Most brokerages have policies in place where they will just pay out the co-op commission amount to that. They will match it up, unless it's agreed upon in writing differently, right? But, if you want to spell it out, that's the way to do it. I will say it's the most common thing in Ontario that is missed, is the fact that when it's within the brokerage, everyone wants to do. They want to see their name on the document. They want to represent their client. And the fun fact about it is only one side needs to sign. You're authorized to bind the brokerage. So if you have it filled out, right, and you're the buyer side, you sign it. Usually you get a call from the listing agent. Why'd you sign it? I haven't signed it. You signed the listing side. Right, and then it's a good education point to just say, hey, this is actually what happens. There is no cooperating brokerage involved, and you can do it. But yeah, it does speak to the competence factor in it, because they look at everything, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying if you do one thing that you're gonna be penalized for
No.
it, but they do look at the whole transaction as a whole.
Right.
Right? Everything you did, from the paperwork down to your actions,
Yeah.
what you said,
How you managed
how
it.
you book showings, what you did, and then they look at everything. And if you have, one of the ones that I like to point out is the commission trust and the co-op, right? You sign the commission trust, especially in that example we gave. There's no cooperating brokerage. There's no reason to sign that commission trust at the bottom of the APS, because there is no cooperating brokerage. That is a commission trust between for the cooperating brokerage and the listing brokerage. And that was one of the ones that actually got proven in court. They said, you know what? This agent did about 4 or 5 different things. One of the one is they signed the commission trust. The other one is the co-op was filled incorrectly.
Yeah.
And because there were 6 things, and those 2 were one that they pointed out, they said, you know what? This shows that you actually don't understand what is happening and what you're doing.
Yeah.
And,
Interesting.
And
Yeah.
so it's very important that you understand the documents, you explain the documents for that reason. And if you have any questions, reach out to your broker manager, reach out to those people that have the forms, the associations that ask the questions, because there's nothing wrong with asking a question.
The other thing they can do, and I don't think many of them do, they can go on OREA's site and look up the forms explained.
100%.
That is my favorite place to go.
Yeah,
if
you
I have a
took
question.
my little pitch there for you.
Sorry, but I'm sorry, Nathan.
That's okay,
But,
that's good.
But that is an amazing spot to go to.
It really is. So if you go to rea.com/standard forms, you can get access to those. The forms explain files are fantastic. Because
They
what they are, they
are.
take the form, there's some writing over top of it or
The
beside
red letter
it that explains-
documents,
we
Red
call
letter
them.
documents, yep.
Yep.
And they really explain the document in detail. For multiple reasons. One, for you to have a clear understanding, but I like to, so you have the proper words to communicate to the client. Because sometimes you know it, but you maybe don't know why. Another thing that's great on OREA's site is they actually have the standard form and clause booklet.
Right.
Where it lists every single clause that's available to you, which is obviously great if the internet crashes and you need to handwrite a clause. Or double check a clause. Maybe you receive an offer and you want to make sure it's written right. But they actually have notes attached to the bottom of some of them, half of them will have notes, and those notes are important, and those notes don't show up when we access them through our third-party providers.
Right.
Right? So a little note might be in there like, hey, this clause you maybe shouldn't use on its own. It needs to be used with this one.
Yes.
Or this is a little bit of gray. You should consider this.
Or it's for the benefit of the buyer, or
Correct.
it's for the benefit of the seller. and
It'll
this
give
is-
you a little
this is the one
explanation of
that's
it.
benefit of the buyer, and this is the same thing, benefit of the seller.
Correct.
And actually look at, so many do not look at, they'll say to me, is that clause all right? And I go, yeah, it's great if I'm the seller, but I wouldn't want it from the buyer. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're not looking at those things.
Yeah.
Well, I want to talk about one because for those who don't know, Nathan and I help look after our Remax Niagara offices, and we had an office meeting. You brought up this one clause that somebody put in. You were like, this violates like 9 different
Yeah.
things, and it was interesting. And because there may be agents out there that have come across this, don't know what's going on,
Right.
or thinking, hey, that looks good, maybe I'll use it. You want to explain a little bit about that particular clause?
Yeah, so, that clause was one that was written that basically, in a nutshell said, you agree, buyer and seller agree that we're not going to report the sale of this. It was conditional on sale of property. Okay, so it was offer sent conditional on sale of property. Seller had countered it back with, we're not going to report the sale of property, the property is sold until you remove the other conditions past the sale of property period, essentially. So what they were trying to do is circumvent the MLS rules and regulations that say you have to keep, active status and
Conditional
current
sale,
thing and report the sale, et cetera, because they didn't want it to harm them in future showings.
Got it.
Because in their
Understood.
opinion, which I get, right, you accept an offer on sale of property, and maybe you lose a little bit of showing activity for that,
Yeah.
Because it would show up as conditionally sold,
With an
continue to
escape
show.
clause,
With an
or
escape.
continue to show
Right.
with
The
clause,
escape is the trigger at the top of the MLS,
Yeah.
that they know it, but that's not a good thing to do.
No.
No.
I think when we went through it was about 8 or 9 rules that it was
Yeah.
broken, and that was just on the MLS side. That wasn't even getting into code of ethics, anything on RICO's side of it, should that have happened. So, it goes to the point of, creating your own clauses or doing your own thing. OREA has a great list of clauses that are vetted and put in for you, and some of them are template clauses, and some of them you have to input your own information on and stuff. But you really need to talk to your broker management when you're trying to create something, because there are situations that come up where there may not be something that fits the mold that you need.
Yeah.
And if that happens, email OREA, they will look at it
Yeah.
for sure. But that's when you need to talk to management, say, hey, listen, I don't want to use this because it doesn't quite fit what I'm looking for. What can we do here to make this work? But yeah, you have to take into the whole picture in that and go from that.
The other thing about sort of what you were saying there, I've told people this all the time, they decide they don't want to report the sale, period, on MLS, and that's a requirement when they sign that MLS contract.
Yeah.
That's a requirement that they must report the sale.
Yeah.
And there's a few of them think they don't have to do that.
Yeah.
There's some very interesting stuff that goes on with that. In our Ian Core for our agents, we do have some specialty clauses that Mike Cassano and I wrote up years ago with red letter at the bottom of it. This works if you're working for the buyer. This works if you're working for the seller. They still hold up pretty good. That's another place if you want to see some that are just a little bit
Yeah, if you're one of
different.
our agents, but
But that's what I said, for one of our
Yes.
people, because we were just talking about one of our people, but not in general. In general, best place to go is to the OREA forms.
go to your broker manager,
Yeah,
go to
a-
RIA,
a lot of
speak to a
brokers-
lawyer.
Yeah, a lot of brokerages might have their own stuff.
Yep.
Particularly, most of them have their own Schedule Bs and things
Yes.
that they want included in offers and things like that. But a lot of them do have clauses, and some of them are specific to the area as well.
Yeah.
And that's where we get a lot of questions on that too, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know the stuff that I wanted to talk about. Did you have anything specific? So since we've covered our stuff off, we always like to come back to our guests and say, look, we always have some questions. We come in, we talk about some things. Is there anything that maybe we haven't talked about that you see as a manager, or even in your travels, working for RIA, that somebody's brought up or something you go, this really needs to be communicated to as many agents as possible?
Oh, man. Well, this podcast is the right venue for that, I think. I have a list, actually, if you're ready, Eric. I have a couple. One is obviously the confirmation of cooperation.
Right.
You know, really think about when there is a cooperating brokerage or not. I think across the province, if we're talking strictly paperwork, that's the one that I think is incorrectly used.
Okay.
Or incorrectly filled out, not used. As far as changes and pain points and what I'm seeing across the province is, you know, we had some changes in the last, oh man, I want to say year and a half, but it's even longer than that now. We're approaching the 2-year
2-year
mark.
mark, yeah.
It is the RICO info guide. You know, a lot of people still aren't using that correctly. They're not giving it to the client when they're supposed to give it.
And that is supposed to be right when you first.
When you give services, so you're supposed to, you're obligated by TRESA before you provide services to anyone.
Yeah.
You're supposed to give them a copy of the info guide. Not only give them a copy, but explain it,
Right.
and then make best efforts to obtain acknowledgement. Right?
Not when
And
you're sending the offer.
not when you're
I
saying
get so many
you've done a
that
service
go with the offer.
I understand that
Yes.
100%, and I understand both sides. But yeah, it's when you're providing services, you know, CMAs, showings, that those types of things are when you're supposed to do it. Now, people always ask, you know, what, this is incredibly hard and difficult. How am I going to explain a 13-page document to someone? Listen, you get a phone call coming in, they want to see a house, and you book the showing. Fire them off an email and send them the document
Yeah.
immediately, right?
Right.
Now you're in compliance because you've given them a copy of it.
Right.
You have to explain it to them, and you just say, you know what, we're going to go see it on Friday. Why don't we I'll give you a copy, and we'll go over it when I'm at the house with you, and
Yeah.
then you can have that explanation and then deal with it then. There's nothing wrong with that. Then you have a documented system in place where you have, where you've sent it. So I think that, but the flip side to that is I understand the pain point. It's a very big document. It's 13 pages if you include the cover.
Yeah.
It's a lot to go through, and a lot of consumers don't want to receive that. And so, you know, BC has had this implemented, a document like this implemented for a period of time. I think theirs is 1 page. Personally, I'd love to see this broken up in future to a 2-step process where we have a 1-page document that basically gives a little bit of a warning or a caution to the consumer and says, hey, you're about to get some services. Here's some things to watch out for. But before you sign an agreement, you'll have to take the next step. And personally, that's what I'd like to see, because I think it's a lot easier to show someone a house or start that business process with a consumer if you could just have something simple to give them, and then before they enter into an agreement, go through the full thing. I really think that's one of the pain points that is happening, but it's still a required document. You know, for those brokerages, just know it's law, and you can't change it. You can't make your own or put your own logos on it. It's got to stay the same. But I think that one there. And then as far as, I know we talked about latent defect and disclosures, but, you know, people kind of get a little bit worried about that and, what do I have to do? What is required of me? It says I have to make it available to everyone who's shown an interest. Very simple, right? You have a disclosure, you can upload it to the MLS as an attachment. That's making it available.
Yeah.
You're complying there
Yeah.
to say, hey, this has been made available. So it's not as difficult as we make it out to be in our minds sometimes. And so that there, but yeah. Anything else for me?
No, it was just more of anything else you wanted to share.
Thank you for listening to my pain point.
Are we still having problem with agents? So my take is, it's up to each agent to decide how they want to do their business, but at their earliest opportunity, they should also be entering into a buyer representation agreement, and they actually should FinTrack the person.
But I think
At the
also
beginning.
that whole guide, though, like you go through that guide, that should make it a lot easier to discuss the buyer rep, and here's the services you're going to get.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to sign it, here's the downside.
And that's
man,
usually
that's
when there's issues, that's what it is too. Because if you look, even we'll touch on the SRP side of it, the self-represented party. When people say, oh, they want to be self-represented, or I'll just make them a self-represented party. I don't know anyone, if you went through those documents properly.
Nobody wants
right?
to be that.
Why would you want to do that when it says in there that, RICO recommends that they get independent legal advice, they're going to pay a lawyer to ask about a sale or ask what they should do. And then on top of that, it says in there, anything that they tell you, you're allowed to tell your client, and you have an obligation to do so. I mean, there are a lot of things in there. And so when you're going over it properly, that's definitely something that I would highlight. But, you know, the buyer rep is one of those ones, Lynn, that as a broker manager, I just wish it would be so much easier for a lot of people and a lot of the discrepancies that we have if everyone had to have one signed before. The reality is the legislation says oral, written, or implied representation. A lot of us work on implied representation. They want to get to know the person first. But I always say, listen, most people are okay to committing to the one house or the two houses that you're going to show them. There's nothing wrong with doing a buyer rep agreement for the 3 that you're going to show on that day. That gives you both an opportunity to learn and know what each other are like, if they want to continue that working relationship, but at least you have something documented and in place that's in writing. Because it says at the earliest practical opportunity, it's got to be reduced to writing.
Which I think is probably at the second time you meet with them or when you're going to start taking them out. Because as an agent, you want to know if you want to work with them. It's not all about them choosing you. It's about you choosing them. Because this is another whole topic, but I've sat.
We don't have time for that.
I know, but I've sat with so many agents who cried, who actually were crying because they trusted their buyer. They trusted them. And they got, worked over and they got nothing. And I could not help them because they had nothing for me to help them with.
That's right.
Right? It's very disappointing. Agents work very, very hard and a long time and make, all sorts of offers before somebody finally gets to one that they pick. You need to make sure you're protected and get paid. So that's my pet peeve.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Nathan. Really appreciate it. I know for some people, for some of you out there, like I really meant, and I know for a lot of you, it is the bane of your existence as a realtor, but it is probably the most important part besides building the relationships that you have with your clients, but this is the integral part of the business, and it's important that you know what to do and how to do it properly. And we appreciate all your efforts that you put into making sure that not just our realtors, but realtors across the province are educated and, because our industry is better when we all work better and when we all do things properly, right?
100%.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more.
So thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Nathan.
Thanks for having me. It's
good.
been great.
And Lynn, thank you for being a trooper. I know dealing with a bit of head cold today, but appreciate you getting through it today.
It's
So
all good. Sorry I coughed a couple of times.
that's okay. Listen, we thank all of you for joining us this week and each and every week that you're here with us. We appreciate you guys. Please, if there's any topics you'd love for us to cover in the future, let us know. Message us. We'd love to hear from you. And until next week, have an awesome week of selling, and we'll see you next time on the Business of Real Estate podcast with Lynn Hoffman and Eric Johnson.